Hi everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Your Food Identity, which is our new series here at Kygo. I'm Penny and I'm going to be talking to Carlin, our in-house dietitian. Here she is. And today we're going to be talking about hormones. Hi Carlin.
Hi, thanks again for having me.
It's such a pleasure. We are so honored to be able to get this kind of information from you. We were talking the other day about how I personally have just started to understand the importance of hormones and how, I just thought women and men have different hormones. I didn't actually know that all women have like different hormone types. So I think it's a great conversation to have. So we are so honored to be able to get your view on it and just give us the knowledge that we need. So I'm going to get straight into it, as I always do, and ask my first question, which is, how are hormones tied to our weight, and how does this differ between men and women?
Yeah, really wonderful question. So I think previously we had this, very simplistic view of weight and weight loss, right? We thought it solely had to do with energy balance, burning more than you would consume. But we're now learning that there are so many factors that contribute to weight and metabolism, hormones being one of them. So, a few examples. First of all, our hunger and satiety hormone. So our satiety hormone, which is leptin. We know through research that consuming high sugar foods and also, increase weight, so fat cells, actually decrease leptin, meaning that we don't feel as satisfied and satiated throughout the day. Our hunger hormone ghrelin, research also shows that being overweight and obese or being on a very, restrictive diet actually increases that hunger hormone. Stress hormone cortisol is another huge factor that can impact metabolism and weight. Again, we see with stress or cortisol, the stress hormone, that overproduction of cortisol leads to an increase in insulin, which is another hormone that I'll talk about next, which in turn leads to an increase in fat deposition in the body. Insulin, probably the most well-known hormone for many people. So insulin is the hormone that our body secretes in response to elevated blood sugar. The issue with many diets in America, many people in America, is that when we're over consuming carbohydrates and we have this chronically high blood sugar, we tend to develop this state of insulin resistance where the body doesn't recognize the hormone as well, and the hormone cannot take the sugar in our blood and bring it into our cells for energy. So what happens is the sugar just sits in our blood. Our body produces more and more of this hormone, insulin. And insulin is a very anabolic hormone, so it causes our body to really hold on to weight. So we see with high insulin levels that people tend to, again, see weight gain and other hormonal shifts as well. And really one of the last ones that I'll talk about today that really plays a role in weight and metabolism is estrogen. So we see in both people that are overweight or underweight, having too much or too little estrogen can really impact weight. So having high estrogen levels, again, tends to lead to this insulin resistance, which again tends to lead to weight gain. And having low estrogen actually shifts the body's energy utilization and converts more energy directly into fat. In terms of men and women, I think the biggest difference in our hormones is this. As women, we have a menstrual cycle with 4 different phases, and our hormones shift dramatically based on, when we're in a certain phase of our cycle, right? So, eating the same way, exercising the same way every single day isn't necessarily the best approach. We want to really sync what we're eating, the nutrients that we're getting, how we're exercising, living our life, and supporting our body based on where we are in our menstrual cycle. And that is really how we can create the best hormonal balance as women. Also, generally as women, we are very sensitive to shifts in energy because we're designed to reproduce at the end of the day. And so, for example, something that I've seen a lot recently in research is that intermittent fasting, which is a really popular diet style these days, really the research shows that from a weight perspective, a metabolism perspective, it doesn't work as well for women because of how our hormones are so tied to our weight and tied to kind of, again, that, fluctuation in energy. So definitely, I think for both men and women, it's important to have an understanding of how different hormones, can affect your weight and your weight loss goals. And definitely staying conscious of, if you have a certain type of condition that predisposes you to a hormonal imbalance, that you're kind of managing that, as well as, just exercising and, trying to eat in a calorie deficit.
It's so interesting. I've got like so many questions just came up in my mind about but what do we, I'll go into those in a second, but what came to my mind while you were speaking about the hormones, it's funny because I think a lot of people, like when you mentioned insulin, and as silly, I guess, as this can sound, coming from, a perspective of like having a really kind of basic knowledge about biology, I've always known that insulin is a chemical that our body produces, didn't ever identify it's a hormone. It's so interesting just having these conversations, to hear it and to identify, like, this is when people talk about chemical imbalance, we're talking about our hormones here. So thank you so much for going into such depth then. Based off of it, I wanted to ask questions about our cycle, but first I wanted to ask what foods might sabotage our hormone health then. If are there foods that have, I don't know, like, is it good hormones in the food? I don't even know how to word it. You'll have to do layman's terms for us. Like, what foods sabotage our hormone health?
Yeah, this is a really wonderful question. Unfortunately, I would say most foods in the standard American diet sabotage hormone health. And the standard American diet really is comprised of primarily ultra-processed foods, right? So an ultra-processed food is a food that has undergone any change from its original state. And the ultra-processed foods are ones that are so far from, their original form that, they typically are just full of sugar, chemicals, and provide very little nutritional value. So they're known as more of those empty calorie foods, right? Think like chips and, candy, soda, things like that. And typically about 90% of preventable chronic diseases are rooted in the standard American diet, right? And that's how powerful nutrition is when it comes to our health. We know that, these ultra processed foods are contributing to, increased weight, insulin resistance, all of those things that we just kind of talked about that influence our hormones. The second would probably be excessive red meat intake and processed meat intake. Really, especially for women, I recommend a little bit of red meat because we want the iron, we want the B vitamins, the protein, but typically what we know from a research perspective is that anything above red meat intake of like once a week tends to actually negatively impact hormone health. And this is because it tends to increase estrogen, and also most meat that people are consuming in America, conventional meat, is made with added hormones, antibiotics, pesticides, things like that, that are going to interfere with our own natural hormone production. So typically, if you are consuming red meat, only grass-fed and organic. The third thing would be low-fat diets or not enough of the right types of fats. So definitely in America, for a while we were very anti-fat. We're now learning that fat is not necessarily something we want to overly restrict. And especially when it comes to hormone balance, fat is essential for hormone production. So we need enough fat in our body and in our diet to produce hormones. But often in the standard American diet, we're consuming the wrong types of fats. So we tend to consume more of the omega-6 fats versus the omega-3 fats. So the omega-6 fats are typically found in processed vegetable oils, canola oil, grapeseed oil, peanut oil, soy oil, whereas the omega-3s are found in things like salmon, sardines, herring, chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, all of these kind of healthier fats. And what we see is that if we're over consuming the omega-6, so the processed vegetable oils, and not consuming enough of the omega-3, this creates inflammation, insulin resistance, all of, the stuff, again, that we talked about that contributes to hormonal imbalance. And the third, and I think, probably most important, is sugar, added sugar. If you, want to do one thing to support your hormone health, cut out added sugar. Again, we talked about insulin, but really at the end of the day, sugar is creating inflammation in the body. Inflammation is going to be damaging to your cells, and just trigger kind of a cascade of hormone imbalances.
Thank you. It's good to have just a straightforward idea of, okay, start cutting this out and we're on the right track at least. So that's really, really helpful. Thank you. And on the other hand, what foods help to support our hormone health then?
Yeah. So typically, more of a Mediterranean style diet is helpful for supporting weight and hormone health, because they tend to be rich in hormone healthy fats. So again, those omega-3s that we talked about, salmon 3 times a week, other types of healthy fats like the monounsaturated fats found in olive oil, avocado, nuts and seeds, very little amounts of saturated fat, more of the plant-based saturated fats like coconut oil or ghee versus kind of saturated fats from dairy or, animal proteins, complex carbohydrates that are high in fiber, and, burn a lot slower into energy. So you're not going to get that same spike in your blood sugar. You're going to have much more stable energy. And typically complex carbohydrates are things like whole grains, more of those starchier vegetables, sweet potatoes and potatoes, legumes and beans, fruits, things that contain fiber. Plant foods would probably be the number one food on my list to support your hormones. Really, I think every single person can benefit from eating more plants. And again, this is because they are high in nutrients, right? They contain phytochemicals and phytonutrients that are high in anti-inflammatory factors and antioxidants that keep our cells and body healthy. They contain fiber that help to bind to toxins and excess hormones in our body and help with eliminating them. And they just help to inherently, create that caloric deficit we need in our diet to actually see weight loss, because they tend to be low in calories and carbs, but high in volume. And then the last would be high quality protein. So again, salmon, I recommend 3 times a week. Eggs, probably my favorite source of protein. They're extremely nutrient dense. And then high quality red meat once a week, and some poultry. Again, really with any type of animal protein, dairy, eggs, I recommend organic and, grass-fed or pasture raised, just because they tend to, utilize chemicals and hormones and things like that in conventional, preparations and of those foods.
It's so interesting that you've said some of these things, because I find the red meat stood out the most to me, because I find there are times when I just do not want to eat red meat at all. Like at the moment, I can't tell you when the last time I ate red meat was. And I just feel like intuitively, I must be like tending to my hormones, because I have no desire to eat it.
Yeah. I mean, listen, a little bit I think is beneficial once a week, beneficial. And again, as long as it's high quality, but too much is what we want to avoid. And definitely the processed meats like, bacon and, salami and bird meats,
sausages.
Sausages we want to avoid.
No, thank you. Away from food, what other lifestyle factors should we be conscious of when we're trying to support our hormone balance? I know you mentioned exercise. Is that like...
So exercise is a really interesting one, because again, when it comes to weight loss, we would assume that more is better, right? But it's not always the case, especially for women, again, because we are so sensitive to stress. We're much more sensitive to stress than men are from a hormone perspective. So typically what I recommend is about 30 minutes of exercise, because beyond that, again, we tend to see that the body starts to produce more cortisol, that stress hormone. But, for women, at least, we want to kind of vary it based on our cycle. So for the first half of your cycle, tend to do more of the higher intensity types of exercises. And then the second half, as you're kind of getting close to your menstrual phase, we want to kind of tone it back, do more restorative types of exercises, walking, Pilates, yoga, because our energy tends to kind of decrease as we get closer to our menstrual phase. But really, I think a lot of it is just listening to your body. If you're exhausted and you don't really have the energy, to do a workout, or really a good indicator is actually how you feel after you exercise. You always want to feel energized at the end. If you feel like totally exhausted and, all you want to do is like go get in bed after your exercise, that's an indicator that it's not working for your body.
That happens to me. I just feel like my body's not used to it and I need to push myself harder.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not always the case.
Some other lifestyle factors beyond exercise, definitely stress is a huge factor. Again, especially for women, if our body is signaling that it's stressed, it's going to shunt energy away from what is called like opportunistic activities, meaning reproduction, which will negatively impact our hormones. So really trying to stay conscious of, stressors in your life and making sure that you're managing, inflammation. So both like internal and then also kind of external stressors as well, through, incorporating mindfulness, obviously incorporating the foods that we talked about, not over exercising and things like that. Getting enough sleep. Sleep is something that I don't think gets enough attention when it comes to our weight, but really there's a lot of research on how poor sleep quality and quantity impacts weight. Really what we know at this point is that getting less than, 6.5 hours per night leads to, a shift in those hunger hormones that we talked about in the beginning. So you tend to feel less satisfied, you tend to feel much hungrier during the day, and you crave a lot more of those high sugar foods, those quick energy foods. And then the last would be toxins in our environment and, what's known as kind of xenoestrogens, if you will. So toxins in our environment come from many sources. Some we can control more than others. What I recommend is trying to kind of take stock of things in your household, in your daily life, foods you buy, plastic use, personal hygiene products, household cleaning products, things like that. Obviously, living in New York City, can't control the air that you're breathing really that much. Although now people are wearing masks more, which is probably actually a good thing. But, trying to at least do your best to control what's in your immediate environment. I think it's something like the average woman encounters like 500 chemicals before she even leaves the door or leaves her house in the morning. Just because of, how pervasive these chemicals are in our environment.
Wow, that's so interesting, especially cleaning products.
Yeah.
We all feel it. As soon as you spray, surface cleaner, you feel it.
Even things like makeup, like something, or like the face wash or shampoo that you're using, little things like that you're using on a daily basis really can add up.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much. So before we go, I just wanted to see a day in the life of someone who is healthily managing their hormones. Yeah. What would they eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner?
Yeah.
Just a few examples.
Sure. So definitely breakfast, you always want to start with protein. That's really important for hormone balance. Again, eggs are a great protein source for hormone health. So some type of veggie and egg scramble, maybe with a side of sliced avocado for some healthy fat and some organic berries for some carbs. Again, we always want to think balance, make sure we have a little bit of everything on our plate. Lunch, I love like a big salad with a ton of veggies, maybe some, grilled protein, like grilled chicken or salmon, throw in some healthy carbs, like a half a cup of quinoa or lentils or chickpeas, something like that. Dinner, dinner, something similar. Again, I always like to base my meal around vegetables. So I usually will do a big, salad with a ton of greens, maybe another cooked, non-starchy vegetable, typically, something in the cruciferous vegetable family that has a lot of antioxidants, so like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, something like that. A little bit of lean protein. So again, you could do your steak or your chicken or your salmon, or any other type of fish. And then a little, maybe half a cup to a cup of some type of healthy carb. I love sweet potatoes or roasted potatoes, or any type of high fiber grain as well.
What about people that are listening to this right now and they look forward to, out of more than anything, their dessert? Yeah. And they're trying to take on board that they've got to stop, cut out extra added sugar. Yeah. What is a dessert idea that could be as satisfying? Yeah.
I love dark chocolate. That's my favorite healthy indulgence, if you will. Really, with desserts, I think a few things. Again, we talked in our first conversation about balance. I think
Yeah.
That's really important to keep in mind. So, you know, if you love ice cream and you want to have it once a week, like have a scoop of ice cream, portion it out. You know, maybe you're not eating the entire pint of ice cream, but you're having a scoop of ice cream, and it's once a week, fine. If you're somebody that's like, I have to have something sweet every single night, okay, you know, maybe I would stick to most nights a week, just like 1 or 2 squares of dark chocolate. I love Who Kitchen's dark chocolate, my personal favorite. They have like super fun flavors.
With peanut butter one.
Yeah. They have one that's like almond. It's like almond butter and like puffed quinoa, and it tastes like a healthy Nestle Crunch bar. It's really good.
Nice.
Another thing that I do a lot, I'll do 1 or 2 dates sliced open, and I'll add like a little scoop of almond or cashew butter and then like a few dark chocolate chips, and it's like a healthy Snickers. So again, like, you know, just trying to be conscious of incorporating nutrition where you can, even in something like dessert. Okay. It's still dessert, but at least it's providing a little bit of nutrition, some micronutrients, and maybe isn't made with high fructose corn syrup or, you know, processed ingredients that we know really are not good for our hormone health.
Definitely. I think a lot of people might automatically feel like the best thing to do is to eat fruit, but would it be wise to eat fruit late at night as a dessert, or is that okay?
Fruit is fine. What matters more is the portion. So a serving of fruit is half a cup, which is not a lot. Like, maybe like half, and maybe about the size of your fist, maybe even a little less. So it's fine to eat it as dessert. But what I typically see is that people just eat too much fruit. The other thing with carbohydrates is you always want to pair them with a protein or a fat. So, you know, maybe just doing a smaller portion of fruit, adding a few, you know, almonds or cashews, or, you know, I love Brazil nuts. Sometimes I'll do like a healthy trail mix with some raspberries, some dark chocolate chips, and some like walnuts or something as like a healthy dessert. But fruit is great.
Brilliant. So we've got loads of actually actionable tips there as well. So thank you so much. I think we will definitely have loads to talk about next week, because now when it comes to our cycle as well, my mind's just like, okay, this is interesting. So maybe we can dig into that a little bit more next time. Perfect. But thanks again, and I look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Yeah, thanks for having me again. Always fun.
Bye.
Bye.